I want to welcome all the audience and the guest speakers who have joined us here today in this webinar. The Daily Star and Bangla School have come forward to host this event today uh, to promote the importance of learning one's mother tongue while living in a foreign land. So we have amazing three guest speakers with us today. We have MPP Doly Begum, who is the first Bangladeshi Canadian to be elected in the legislative body in Canada. We have Dr. Tahseen Shams, who is an assistant professor in sociology in the department in the University of Toronto. And last but not the least, we have the CEO and founder of Bangla School himself, Mr. Razeeb Chowdhury. I welcome you all. All right. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about the importance of mother tongue. And let's quickly move on today since, we have a bit of short time here. All right. Let's quickly move on to our first speaker today, Dr. Tahseen Shams. Dr. Shams, how are you today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on this very important and exciting panel.
Of course, it's an honor. Absolutely. So my first question to you, Dr. Shams, is what do you think is the importance of children of immigrants to learn their mother tongue while they're in a foreign country?
Well, of course, it's incredibly important, but if you allow me, let me tell you why it's important. The way that we understand language, it's not just a way to communicate our ideas, but it's language symbolizes a way of looking at the world, a way of understanding the world, a way to hold on to the peoples and the places and the histories and the cultures that we have left behind when we moved from one country to settle in another. In this new country, we are often strangers in a strange land, especially when most of the people in this country don't look like us, don't sound like us, don't see the world the way that we are most accustomed to seeing. And language is a way, a connection that ties different cultures together, different histories, different peoples and places together. And that's one of the reasons why when we are in a foreign country, we often try to find other people like us who speak the same language as us, who look like us. And that's not just because we want that familiarity and the ease of speaking the same language, but we want people to know where we come from. We want other people who see the world the same way as we do. And of course, when we are parents, we want our children to have that connection as well. We want our children to have that connection to their ancestral homeland, to the histories, but also of more immediate importance to the people, to the family, the families and the relatives and the friends and the peoples that we have left behind in the homeland. So that's, of course, one of the central reasons why children of immigrants to know their mother language is so important. But also, if you try to understand it in a more sociological way or in a more psychological way, language, knowing different languages, especially the language of the host land and the homeland, gives us additional skills to look at the world, to understand the world in a more meaningful way. Language is a way of, again, understanding society from a unique lens. When Bangladeshis try to understand what's going on in the world, it looks very different from how a Canadian or an American who has been born and brought up in these countries understand the same world, but in a very different way. Knowing different languages prepares children, prepares people to have additional skill sets that different languages give us. So I would say that the two most important reasons why it's so important for children of immigrants to at least be familiar to speak and read the mother tongue is one to know where they have come from, to have that connection to the loved ones and the places and histories where their families have come from, and looking forward to use that connection, to use that knowledge to better understand the world, to better move forward with additional skill sets that will present a number of advantages in work and in school.
Right, amazing. So, like you mentioned, as much as we understand that it's very, very important for the children to learn their mother tongues. So, what do you think are the challenges that they face while trying to learn their mother tongues in a foreign land, and especially when we are talking about Bangla? Uh, a very brief comparison between the challenges that the kids face learning Bangla compared to other languages like Hindi, Korean, or Mandarin.
That's actually a great question because that implies the global inequality and power hierarchy that we immigrants from the global south often face when we come to places like Canada, places like the US or Australia or the UK. And that's because um, most of the people don't speak our language. Uh, our language doesn't have the kind of leverage that languages like Spanish or Mandarin or Korean, these languages have. So of course that produces an additional challenge when your kid goes to school and very few people speak that language. So one challenge that parents I've seen often have to deal with is to make Bangla interesting, to make Bangla relevant, that, it's not just about speaking to your friends right now, but this is Bangla has other uses for you. So that way of making Bangla relevant, fun, and important to your life now is something that parents often struggle with when they're trying to teach their kids, Bangladeshi parents, when they try to teach their kids Bangla. Of course, uh, a significant challenge is that other languages like Mandarin, Korean, Hindi, these languages symbolize connections or advantages to countries that are major geopolitical economic powers, that Bangla is not yet at that level. So, when kids go to college or university, they often have a foreign language component. And usually that means learning Spanish or French or Mandarin or even Arabic, but very, very seldom Bangla. So again, there's this challenge. Why is Bangla relevant? Why should we invest so much time to learning Bangla? So these are the most immediate challenges that Bangladeshi parents often have to face. The way that Bangladeshi parents understand teaching Bangla is often Bangladeshis find themselves in a precarious position in a country like Canada or the US. They feel that they will never be fully understood, they will never be fully accepted. So their kids might have to deal with a number of unpleasant situations, experiences of otherness at school. So learning Bangla gives them that buffer, that you have this community who will always be there for you, who will advocate for you, who will understand where you're coming from. Kids, when they're especially young, of course, don't think about that the same way as parents do. They want to play video games, they want to hang out with their friends, they want to watch TV and YouTube channels or whatever other things that kids nowadays do. Where does Bangla come in? Like, why are my parents forcing me to learn Bangla and over the weekend? So that's a significant challenge, and this is where I think that Rajeeb's initiative, Bangla School, is so instrumental because it helps parents to overcome that hurdle and make Bangla relevant, make Bangla fun. for the kids.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shams. My next question is to Doly Begum. Madam, how are you today?
I'm okay. Thank you so much for having me. Please just call me Dolly.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, my first question to you is um, how do you think learning a mother tongue helps create a country that believes so much in diversity?
That's a great question. And I was just listening to Dr. Shams and just nodding because everything she was saying, we experience it. Um, I'll start off with a little bit of a background in terms of where I think my understanding comes from. I call myself one and a half generation. So I came here when I was young, but I had enough of exposure to Bangla language to, you know, getting to know my family members in Bangladesh, where I built that root. So there, I carried all of that with me when I came here. And I think a lot of parents that bring their children, I relate to those children and I understand what parents go through because I've seen my parents kind of struggle at that moment where, you know, my dad taught me how to speak English because I came here without English. So Bangla was the only language that I brought with me that I understood that meant that really allowed for me to experience the world in sort of in that direction. But when I came here, it was completely new, and it was almost impossible to mingle in your classroom, make friends until I found another Bangladeshi who I became friends with. And I remember, and I was actually talking to Rajiv about this, is that we would be good at math, for example, but English class was where you did not want to speak. Sociology, for example, or I mean, any of the sciences or anything that required language were the ones, even though you knew the subject, you did not do well. What's amazing is Canada is a country where you have people from so many different countries, so many different parts of the world. Obviously, when I came, that was in that we didn't have as many people. So, for example, I was probably one of the only few people that was racialized in my classroom, that was of color. That has changed, and that change is what when you talk about diversity, when you talk about what it means, that change allows us to value language more and to understand how important it is to allow kids to learn their own language and have a deeper respect as well for their languages. I think now when I go to classrooms right now as MPP and talk to teachers and talk to people from talk to kids, and it's really interesting because I sometimes see that sort of dynamic between the kids and how they find their own groupings based on that, which is really beautiful because I would say kids have it a little bit easier now when they have, five different other students from different backgrounds because that strengthens that diversity. I wouldn't say it's perfect yet. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done when we look at that. Look at the issues of students still being discriminated. There is still areas where people feel like they don't have the ability to even that having an accent can cause problems. And I think actually our parents probably have a bigger struggle with that. People who come here at a later age have a stronger accent, and they face a lot of discrimination, whether it's in the workforce, whether it's at home with their kids, trying to kind of connect again and say, "Daddy, that's not how you pronounce something," or "Mom, that's not how you say something." We hear it all the time. I've gone through it where I've said the same thing. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done to that, but it's still, I think, creates a lot of value when you have that language, when you have that ability to bring your root with you, but also connect, and then when you bring the two together. So yeah, it's a beautiful way of having that deeper meaning that I truly respect and value.
Amazing. So, talking about the newer generation, do you think the newer generation is slowly drifting away from their culture? If yes, then what do you think is wrong with that?
It's it's that's one of the difficulties we see in any country that's not your sort of your homeland, or that is different from your grandparents and your parents. And it's also a bigger and the I think I would say yes and no, because our parents try really hard to hold us to that, and I know Rajeev's going to talk about the way the apps trying to do that, and the app has a I think it's actually going much further than what what he talks about, because I feel like there's a much deeper value, because it will do exactly that, to connect us to our culture, connect us to our background. But what we see here in a country like Canada, for example, or in the US or UK. I mean, I stayed in the UK for a little bit of time, and I was studying there, and I remember speaking to some of my younger relatives, and being a little bit sad that they have completely lost the language. And it was sort of a strange type of Banglish that had more English than Bangla, and very few Bangla words in between, because they did not know how to say those words in English, because their family did not have that ability. And I also have a dialect, so that creates another level of intricacy in terms of how you look at that. But the idea of drifting away from culture comes when you do not have the ability to connect anymore. And language is that foundation that allows us to connect. Whether we're talking about music, whether we're talking about arts, whether you're talking about learning a story from your grandma, right? This is, something I so value is the conversations I have with my grandparents. And I don't think kids these days have the ability to do that, because those are the real stories that allows you to know about your ancestors, your family, what your culture was about, what the histories, all of that comes. And as a political science student, one of the things I remember is there are certain words which in English you will never be able to fully comprehend what the meaning of it is. And I think Bangla has a lot of those words. German has a lot of those words, and the meaning is so much more in depth than what we understand when we talk about those words, or when we try to translate it. And it's a shame I think if you miss out on that. And I remember having a professor actually at UFT who tried so hard to give us a whole bunch of different meanings, to say, now think of all the meanings together. That is what this word will encompass. And I think Bangla is one of those languages that has so many deeper meanings when we talk about their different types of sayings, different colloquial things as well, that we will never be able to really appreciate that value of it. And that is part of our culture. That is part of that root that I think is so important when you have that language.
Thank you so much, Doly. We will be coming back to you. My next question is to Rajeeb Bhai. Bhai, ki obostha? How are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you. I think I was on mute.
Can you hear me, Bhai?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So my question to you is, being the founder of this app that is trying to solve these problems that we've been talking about, what do you think is the problem? What do you think is the reason, because of reason for the lack of interest of children to learn Bangla as a language?
আমি বাংলায় কথা বলি। হ্যাঁ, আমি যেটা দেখেছি সেটা হচ্ছে যে আমার এক্সপিরিয়েন্সটা একদম আমার বাসা থেকে। আমার দুটো বাচ্চা, আমি দুইটা এক্সট্রিমই দেখছি। একটা হচ্ছে আমার মেয়ে, ও যখন বাংলাদেশ থেকে আমরা এখানে চলে আসি তখন শি ওয়াজ 11। তো ওর বাংলাদেশে একটা বাংলা শেখার একটা বেইজ ওর ছিল। আর আমার ছেলে যখন আমরা আসি তখন ওর ছিল 4 বছর বয়স। তো ওর এখান থেকে সব পড়াশোনা শুরু। তো আমরা একদম দেখতে পাই যে ওদের চেঞ্জগুলো কীভাবে আসছে। মানে আমার ছেলে ধীরে ধীরে কীভাবে করে, যে কোয়েশ্চেন ইউ আস্ক ডলি, যে কীভাবে করে ড্রিফট অ্যাওয়ে করছে আমাদের বাচ্চারা, তা আমি দেখছিলাম যেই প্রবলেমটা আসলে আমরা আইডেন্টিফাই করি সেটা হচ্ছে যে আমরা প্যারেন্টরা যেভাবে করে একটা বাচ্চাকে বাংলা শেখাতে চাই আর আমার বাচ্চারা যেভাবে করে এখন অন্যান্য সব কিছু শেখে, সেটা ইংলিশ হতে পারে, সেটা ম্যাথস হতে পারে, সেটা কোডিং হতে পারে, সেটা সুইমিং হতে পারে, যে কোনো কিছু হতে পারে, এই দুটো টেকনিক অথবা দুইটা ফিলসফির মধ্যে দেয়ার ইজ এ হিউজ ডিফারেন্স। মানে আমরা যারা বাংলাদেশ থেকে পড়াশোনা করে এসেছি অথবা আমাদের একটা সিগনিফিক্যান্ট পার্ট বাংলাদেশে থেকেছে, আমাদের ওখানে কিন্তু টিচার আর স্টুডেন্টের রিলেশনশিপটা এখানকার একটা বাচ্চার স্কুলের টিচার স্টুডেন্টের রিলেশনশিপের মতো না। এখানকারটা ইজ মোর ফ্রেন্ডলি, মোর ওপেন। আর আমাদের জেনারেশন অথবা আমরা যারা বাংলাদেশ থেকে পড়াশোনা করে এসেছি, আমাদের মধ্যে কিন্তু টিচার আর স্টুডেন্টের মধ্যে সম্পর্কের মধ্যে ভয় একটা অনেক বড় একটা ব্যাপার। তো আমরা যখন এখানে বাংলা শেখাতেও চাই, আমরা হয়তো বা ওইখানকার টিচিং মেথডোলজিগুলো ইউজ করার চেষ্টা করি যে শিখবি না কেন, তোকে মুখস্থ করতে বললাম, তুই এটা মুখস্থ করবি। উইচ ইভেনচুয়ালি যেটা করে সেটা হচ্ছে বাচ্চাদেরকে বাংলার প্রতি একটা ভালোবাসা তো দূরে থাক, উল্টা একটা ভয় অথবা ওইটাকে এড়িয়ে চলার একটা টেন্ডেন্সি ওদের মধ্যে কাজ করে। আমি যদি খুব একটা এক্সাম্পল দিয়ে বলি যে ধরেন আমরা জানি যে বাচ্চাদের হেলথি ফুড খাওয়ানো দরকার, ওদেরকে ভেজিটেবলস খাওয়ানো দরকার, গ্রিনস খাওয়ানো দরকার। এখন বাচ্চারা তো সেটা পছন্দ করবে না। এখন আমরা যদি জোর করে ওদেরকে কোনো রকম স্পাইস ছাড়া একদম পুরো একটা টেস্টলেস একটা ভেজিটেবল ওদেরকে খাওয়াতে চাই, সেটা তো ওরা রিজেক্ট করবেই, খুব স্বাভাবিক। তো আমরা প্যারেন্টসরা কী করি, আমরা তো নানা রকমের ট্রিক করি। আমরা নুডলসের মধ্যে একটুখানি ব্রকলি দিয়ে দিই, আমরা হয়তো বা মজা করে কোনো একটা জুস বানিয়ে দিই। সো আমরা ওই ট্রিকগুলা করি। সেম থিং যদি অন্যান্য অ্যাঙ্গেল থেকে আমি বলি যে লেটস সে আই অ্যাম আ বিগ ফ্যান অফ ক্রিকেট। এখন আই কেম ফ্রম দ্যাট টাইম যখন ক্রিকেট ওয়াজ এ 5-day টেস্ট ম্যাচ। আমরা পছন্দ করতাম ইমরান খান, সুনীল গাভাস্কার, ভিভ রিচার্ডস, তাদের খেলা। আমি যদি এখন এক্সপেক্ট করি আমার কানাডায় বড় হওয়া ছেলে হু লাভস NFL, হু লাভস NBA, দ্য ফাস্ট পেস একটা প্রচণ্ড অ্যাড্রেনালিন রাশ একটা খেলা, তাকে যদি আমি চাই যে তুই আমার সাথে বসে 5 দিন ধরে টেস্ট ম্যাচ দেখবি, ইটস নট গনা হ্যাপেন, রাইট? তো আমরা কি করি, আমরা ওইখানটাতে একটা ব্যালেন্স তৈরি করি যে উই স্টার্ট উইথ দ্য T20 ম্যাচ উইচ ইজ দ্য সেম কাইন্ড অফ আ গ্ল্যামার অর দ্য গ্লিটস, যে চিয়ার লিডার্স আছে, মজা হচ্ছে, 2 ঘন্টায় খেলা শেষ হয়ে যায়। সো ওই যে ব্যালেন্সের জায়গাটা, যে বাংলাটাকে রেলেভেন্ট করা টু দ্য নিউয়ার জেনারেশন, সেই জায়গাটাই আসলে আমরা একটু ল্যাক করছিলাম, যেটা আমরা বাংলাটাকে মজা করে বাচ্চাদেরকে দিতে পারছিলাম না। অনেকে বলে, আমরা প্যারেন্টসরা অনেক সময় বলে যে ভাই বাংলা তো কঠিন। কোনটা কঠিন না? ম্যাথস কঠিন না, কোডিং কঠিন না, ফ্রেঞ্চ কঠিন না, সব কিছুই তো কঠিন। বাট থিং ইজ, আমি তো যখন আমার বাচ্চাকে প্রথম কোডিং ক্লাসে দিব, আই ওয়ন্ট এক্সপেক্ট যে ও এখন একটা অ্যাংরি বার্ডসের মতো গেম লিখে ফেলবে। ওর আমি ওকে এখন ম্যাথস দিব, ক্লাস 1-এ সে এখন একটা কঠিন একটা ট্রিগোনোমেট্রিক্স ইকুয়েশন সে সলভ করে ফেলবে। উই মেক এভরিথিং রেলেভেন্ট টু এনজয়েবল, যেন এটা শুরু করতে পারে। আমরা বাচ্চাদের বাংলা শেখানো শুরু করতে যাই কি, পয়লা বৈশাখে আমরা ওদেরকে কবিতা শেখানো শুরু করি, তাপস নিঃশ্বাস বায়ে মুমুর সুরে দাউড়ায়। ম্যান, লাইক ওয়েট ওদেরটা একটু বোঝা দরকার। ওরা ওরা পাগল হয়ে যাবে যেগুলো কি বলতেছেন আপনারা। সো ওদের কাছে মনেই হয় যে বাংলা ইজ এ ভেরি ডিফিকাল্ট ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ। আমরা যখন জাতীয় সঙ্গীতটাও শেখাতে চাই, দেয়ার আর মেনি কঠিন শব্দ, সেগুলো প্রথমে না, আমাদের প্রথমে একটু সহজ করে শেখাতে হবে। সো বাংলা স্কুল আসলে ওরকমভাবে ওই ফিলোসফিতেই কাজ করেছে যে টু মেক বাংলা লার্নিং ইজি, ফান অ্যান্ড রেলেভেন্ট টু দ্য নিউয়ার জেনারেশনস। সো এখনও পর্যন্ত যারা ইউজ করছে তারা খুব খুশি, বাচ্চারা খুব এনজয় করছে, সেজন্য বাবা মাও খুব খুশি হচ্ছে। সো লেটস সি কি হয়।
Thank you, Rajeeb bhai. My next question, I'll be going back to Dr. Shams. So we understand যে parents এর সাথে যখন বাচ্চাগুলো কথা বলছে, so they find a way, they somehow find a way, even if they're not talking the same language, even they find a way. But since they're living together under the same roof, they will have to find a way to communicate. But there are grandparents, there are relatives who are living back home. So what is the importance, do you think, is what is the importance of talking to them in Bangla, the relatives, the grandparents who cannot speak in any other language?
That's another great question, but I would like to pick apart something that you just mentioned about kids and parents living under the same roof. They find some way or another to communicate with one another. Very true. But that doesn't guarantee that the communication is good or that it's nice or that it's pleasant. An argument could also be a communication. So one thing, going also back to your very first question, why learning the mother tongue is important, because it drastically can shape the dynamics within a family. When you have kids who don't understand where you're coming from, they don't have that connection to the history and culture, and again, the worldview that you are coming from, they tend to drift apart from you. The parents' generation and the children's generation do often drift apart because of the lack of good communication, right? Because they don't speak the same language as their parents. They don't understand the world the same way as the parents. So, not being able to speak the same language or even have an understanding of what that language means, especially for Bangla, when Bangla is very much part of the Bangladeshi identity, right? We fought for this language because it meant something about who we are as a nation. When kids don't have that kind of understanding, it adds to the generational divide, especially going back to what Dolly was saying as well, that it's a different kind of multicultural world when most of the languages that you hear in your classroom is not the language that your parents speak at home. So, yes, kids and parents do have a way to communicate with one another, but it doesn't mean that that is a good thing. Not being familiar, not speaking the same language often can lead to this generational divide, less and less understanding, and more drifting apart. That, of course, is connected to not being able to speak to relatives, not being able to understand the world and the wisdom that your grandparents often bring with them when they talk to you, when they tell you stories about their childhood. Or, my grandmother, my dadu, used to tell me so many stories, and there was always some kind of moral, some kind of nugget of wisdom at the end, that I used to be very annoyed when I was a kid, because stories always have this moral lesson. But now these stories have made me who I am, right? I think about, I go do something, and something or another reminds me of a character she told me in a story. You lose that connection. You lose that way of understanding the world. You lose the ability to have connections beyond your immediate family. You don't have that support system. You don't have that structure. And you don't have that wisdom. You don't have the ability to understand how different people in the same family can have different takes on what you're going through in life. We go through life and we come across struggles. We often turn to our parents, but we also turn to our chachi or to our mami, to our khala, and to our nanu, and to our dadu. How can you do that when you can't even communicate with them? How can you do that when you speak different languages? The most that you can expect is saying a hello and goodbye. So you lose something when you don't speak the same language as your family. And that has a repercussion even in your immediate family, even when you are living under the same roof.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shams. That was amazing. I understand the whole concept a lot better now. You're right. It's hardly a communication when it's a fight. So my next question is to going back to Doly Begum. Ma'am, So, do you think learning a mother tongue helps to create a society, helps to better make the society better uh, if one learns their mother tongue or communicates in that language? How does it impact the society?
That's I think it just touched on exactly where Dr. Shams left off, because I think the way we build society, it starts from home, it starts from our family, and there is a few things that I'll pick up on, which is if the ability to have a healthy relationship at home with your relatives, all of that, the big tool that you have is language. And I see it here in Canada, for example, in Ontario, where we have a lot of people who have whether we're talking about mental health issues, whether we're talking about depression, whether we're talking about just kind of families breaking apart. I think it has a lot to do with the ability to have that relationship, that connection, which you're able to do when you can express yourself in the language that you want to, that you feel comfortable with, and when the other person understands it in the way in the language that they are comfortable with. And there's a big disconnect right now. There's a lot of kids I talk to who feel like they're sort of in the middle somewhere, stuck. They're here nor there, because you go to school, you're exposed to English, and then when until you're in grade 12, you're exposed to French, which is another language that you have to learn. And even sometimes I've heard parents say that, we don't want them to learn too much of Bangla because we want them to do well in school, which is actually the exact opposite of what I learned growing up, thinking that the more languages you have, the wider, or even, your mental capacity to learn more languages is actually better. And I think there's work that some of us are doing to dismantle that. And I think, Rajeeb's work is actually dismantling that. That sort of misconception that you need to be so narrowed to focus in one language to make sure that your kids do really well in classroom sometimes backfires. And it actually, it creates a distance between those parents as well. So only parents who have that, and it goes back to sort of your level of income as well, where you grew up, the type of schools your parents went to. If they have that ability to also communicate in English, then they're able to do that, and that create that connection, build that connection with their kids, which is so important, because the way our kids grow up and the early learning part of it is where we get shaped in terms of understanding society, in terms of what's important. When we go out there and we talk about mental health, we talk about the idea of what our society is facing right now, in terms of the larger sort of problems around us. Whatever classes you're taking, whatever studies you're taking, all of that can be so important. And it's really interesting, because I feel like you don't have the ability to even gain more knowledge if you don't have that language. The more languages you have, it actually allows you to have more knowledge, more awareness of what's going on. And I'll pick up one of the things that Rajeeb shared about his app, which was, when we have kids learning a small amount of letters, we allow them to do a story with just those letters. And that sense of empowerment, to me, that was so beautiful, because I just thought, that's perfect, because that's what we were missing when we really tried to go from one stage of learning to another. And I want to tie this back to what we're talking about in society and building society. All of that is because if you don't have the idea of feeling empowerment, feeling that connection, it makes it so much harder to think that my thoughts are important enough to be shared, and for the other person to take you with that same sense of value, right? And I think the amount of people, and in my role, I get to talk to a lot of people who come from different countries, where they feel vulnerable, because they don't have the ability to just walk out of their house and find resources that they want. Even if the resource is available, because of the lack of language, you're not able to access that. I saw this during COVID a lot. A lot of people had no idea where to get their vaccine, where to get a PCR test, where to even find out if they got fired from their workplace, how to navigate that process. And mainly it was racialized women who did not have another language other than the one they learned back home, and a little bit of English just to get through the sort of the job they did in a factory, for example. And that is, it really takes you away from that sense of empowerment. There is so much as autonomy from you that it takes away. And all of that is rooted in the way we allow someone to gain that valuable knowledge, gain that awareness, and that comes with language. So, when we talk about building society, all of that, the importance of language in society, I don't think can be overstated in any way.
Thank you, Doly. So going back to Rajeev Bhai, we have been talking about all these problems. So how could you please tell us a bit about how all these problems are being solved by Bangla School?
I don't think like I could solve all the problems, but at least like I can proudly say that we have started something. We addressed all the issues যেগুলো আমাদের যারা আমরা বাইরে থাকি সেই প্যারেন্টরা ফিল করে, এবং টু সাম এক্সটেন্ট বাংলাদেশেও যে যারা দেখছে যে তাদের বাচ্চারা বাংলা থেকে ধীরে ধীরে সরে যাচ্ছে অথবা বাংলার প্রতি আগ্রহ হারিয়ে ফেলছে, তাদেরকে একটা এনভায়রনমেন্ট দেয়া, তাদেরকে এমন কিছু দেয়া যেটা নিয়ে তারা কথা বলতে পারে, ফ্যামিলির মধ্যে কথা বলতে পারে। আমি প্রোডাক্টটার ডিটেইল একটু পরে যাই, আমি একটা দুটো এক্সাম্পল শেয়ার করি। আমি যেই এলাকাটাতে থাকি এখানে খুব বেশি এশিয়ান ছিল না বেশ কিছুদিন আগেও, এখন কিছু কিছু এসছে। তো আমার ছেলে ও গ্রেড 4-এ পড়ে, ওর ক্লাসে কখনো কোনো বাংলাদেশি ওর ফ্রেন্ড ছিল না। তো আমরা কখনো আশাও করি নাই যে ও বাংলায় কথা বলবে অথবা বাংলায় ওর কোনো বন্ধু থাকবে। তো হঠাৎ আমরা ওর একটা বাংলাদেশি বন্ধু পেয়ে গেলাম, ওদের ক্লাসেই পড়ে। তা আমরা খুব খুশি, যাক ওরা বাংলায় কথা টথা বলবে, তো কিসের কি, ওরা কি বাংলায় কথা বলে নাকি, ওরা ইংরেজিতেই কথা বলছে নিজেদের মধ্যে। তো দেন বাংলা স্কুল কেম, এবং আমার ওর যে ফ্রেন্ড, ওর প্যারেন্টসরাও বাংলা স্কুলটা ডাউনলোড করে ওকে দিয়েছে ইউজ করার জন্য। তো 2-3 দিন আগে আমি যখন ওকে স্কুল থেকে পিক করতে গেলাম, তো ওরা দুজন আসছে হেঁটে হেঁটে, এবং ওরা কথা বলছে, গল্প করতে করতে আসছে, এবং তারা ইংরেজিতেই গল্প করছে, কিন্তু ওরা কথা বলতেছিল বাংলা নিয়ে। ওরা বলছিল যে বাংলা স্কুলে হাউ হিজ ফ্রেন্ড কুড রাইট দ্য ওয়ার্ড বাবা জাস্ট 5 মিনিট ক্লাস করার পরে, এবং হাউ হিজ ড্যাড লাইক রিয়াক্টেড, হাউ হ্যাপি হি ওয়াজ। সো ওদের কনভারসেশনের মধ্যে বাংলা স্কুল কুড অ্যাট লিস্ট বাংলার ভালোবাসাটাকে ঢুকিয়ে দিতে পেরেছে। গত পরশু রাতের একটা ঘটনা, ওয়ান অফ মাই ফ্রেন্ডস, তো ও আমাকে প্রথম থেকে, শি ওয়াজ ভেরি স্কেপটিক, আমার ছেলে অসম্ভব দুষ্ট ভাই, আমার ছেলে বাংলা শিখবে না, আমার ছেলেকে বসানো যায় না, বাংলার কথা বললে সে অনেক দূরে থাকে, হবে না ভাই, বাংলা স্কুলে হবে না। শি টেক্সটেড মি সেইং যে সে গত 2 ঘন্টা ধরে তার ট্যাবে বাংলা স্কুল দেখছে, সে নিজে নিজে বাংলায় বাবা লিখে সে তার বাবাকে দেখিয়েছে, এবং সে ওইটার মধ্যে গেমগুলো খেলতে ট্যাবটাকে বুকের মধ্যে নিয়ে সে ঘুমায় গেছে। সো দ্যাট ওয়াজ এ হিউজ সারপ্রাইজ টু দ্যাট প্যারেন্টস, যে বাংলা নিয়ে তারা তো কম চেষ্টা করেনি আগে, তারা অনেকভাবে আজিয়ে প্রভাতে রবির কর শেখাতে চেষ্টা করেছিল, তারা অনেকভাবে বাংলা প্রোগ্রামে তাদেরকে দিয়ে কবিতা বলানোর চেষ্টা করেছিল, এবং সাকসেসফুল হয়েও ছিল। আউটসাইডে তারা দেখতে পেরেছিল তার বাচ্চা কবিতাটা বলতে পেরেছে, বাট হোয়াট হ্যাপেন্ড ইনসাইড, যে বাংলার প্রতি তার কি ভালোবাসা জেগেছে নাকি ভয় জেগেছে, সেটা আসলে আমরা প্যারেন্টসটা অনেক সময় খেয়াল করি না। তো what we did in Bangla school, we tried to identify all the issues that the parents are facing. We tried to find out solutions that not necessarily the parents will love, but the kids will definitely love. So in fact, দ্য ছোটোখাটো কোনো ব্যাপার ধরেন কনসেপ্ট ওয়াইজ চিন্তা করাটা খুব ভালো যে ওদেরকে আমরা ভিডিও টিউটোরিয়াল দিব, বাট হু উইল টিচ ইন দ্য ভিডিও টিউটোরিয়াল, দ্যাট ইজ ভেরি ইম্পর্ট্যান্ট। মানে উই থট অ্যাবাউট ইট আ লট। আমি প্রথমে চিন্তা করছিলাম যে আই এম গুড উইথ কিডস, আমি অ্যাপিয়ার করবো, আমি টিচিংগুলো আমি দিব। তো আমার বাচ্চারা আমাকে বলছে, বাবা ইউ আর লেম, তো ইউর জোকস আর লেম, ইউর অ্যাকসেন্ট, no, it's not the accent that we used to like here in our school. So okay, that was quite an insult, but okay, I took it. And we tried to find out the best solution. So we could find that. So আমরা পেয়েছি একজনকে যে আমাদের টিচারগুলো দেয়, এবং এখন পর্যন্ত যতগুলো বাচ্চা দেখছে they just fell in love with that girl. And the duo যেখানে আমাদের ভিডিওগুলোর মধ্যে হয়, যে রাফি and জিয়ন, so those were like so joyful, এত মজার, so বাচ্চারা পছন্দ করছে। we uh, we devised a game. That game is very much comparable with what they play, like Minecraft or Roblox. So খুবই ভালো গ্রাফিক্স, ওরা এনজয় করছে নিজেরা খেলা, ওখানে লেখার কিছু ডিভাইস আছে, নিজেরা লিখতে পারে। সো বাচ্চারা নিজেরা নেভিগেট করছে অ্যাপটা, একটা থেকে একটা স্টেজে যাচ্ছে, ওরা নিজেরা টের পাচ্ছে না কোন জায়গা দিয়ে তারা বাংলাটা শিখে ফেলছে। এবং ওই যে বললাম যে 5 মিনিটের ক্লাসে তারা বাবা লিখতে পারে। হোয়াট ডলি ওয়াজ মেনশনিং, যে আমরা আসলে মডিউলার, তো একটা করে আমরা লেটার ইনকর্পোরেট করি এবং ওইটা দিয়ে ওরা শেখে। সো ইটস মোর লাইক একটা লেগোর একটা জিনিস দিয়ে দেওয়া, এবং ওরা হচ্ছে পিসগুলাকে জাস্ট জোড়া লাগায় নিজেরা কোনো একটা কিছু তৈরি করে। সো আমরা যখন অনেকের কাছে আমি এক্সপ্লেন করতে গেছি, অনেকে হয়তো বলে যে ও আচ্ছা, একটা বাংলা শেখার জন্য একটা অ্যাপ বানাইছেন আপনারা। আই থিঙ্ক লাইক দ্যাটস নট দ্য ওয়ে উই থট। অ্যাপ ইজ জাস্ট দ্য ইনস্ট্রুমেন্ট টু রিচ এভরিওয়ান। অনেক সময় আমরা কম্পেয়ার করি যে আচ্ছা বাংলা স্কুলে দেয়া অথবা অন্য কিছু দেয়া, বাট উই থট অফ এভরিওয়ান। লাইক একটা সিটিতে যে একজন বাংলাদেশি আছে, he or she should have the same access যদি তার ইন্টারনেটটা থেকে থাকে। সো অ্যাপ ইজ জাস্ট দ্য ইনস্ট্রুমেন্ট। বাট যেটা দুইজনই মেনশন করছিল, ডলি অ্যান্ড তাহসিন, ইটস লাইক আমরা ফ্যামিলির মধ্যে, ফ্রেন্ডদের মধ্যে বাংলা যে একটা কুল ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ, বাংলা যে অনেক মজা, বাংলা নিয়ে যে কথা বলা যায়, আমরা এইটা তৈরি করার চেষ্টা করছি। আই থিঙ্ক দ্যাটস ওয়্যার আই এম লিটল প্রাউড অফ, যে না আমরা এটা করতে পেরেছি, এবং প্যারেন্টসরা এবং বাচ্চারা এটাকে অ্যাকসেপ্ট করে নিয়েছে এখন পর্যন্ত। I don't know whether I could answer your question, but আর কিছু বলার নাই।
If it's
Thank you,
okay,
Rajeeb.
I can add.
Sure.
I can add something to what Rajeeb has just said, which goes back to your question as well, Sadia. Like, why, how does Bangla compare to learning other languages? And because of the perceived irrelevance of Bangla, often the most effective way to teach kids Bangla is the path of least resistance. When you are pulling kids away from a weekend when they could spend that day with their friends or watching a movie or just being in their PJs and watching YouTube or playing some video game, and you take them like half an hour away to like the exact kind of teaching classroom that you are familiar with from back in Bangladesh, the whole thing sucks for the kids. They are not happy with what's going on. And what I think that Bangla School does really well through this app, in addition to the inclusivity and the diversity, the initiative that it also touches upon, is it is the path of least resistance. The kids don't have to be pulled away from what they're doing at home to go to this classroom and learn kaka gaka. They can just use their dad's or their mom's iPad and just learn Bangla in a really fun way. They're just playing video games. But as they're doing that, they're actually learning how to spell. They're learning how to recognize different letters, put different words together, and eventually sentences. And it's actually very, very easy. I did it like I did it. I did look at the game. It was very fun. And this is coming from somebody who's not into video games, but I got sucked into it. So it is really fun. And it is a very easy, fun way that I think that parents could also be easily involved with as a partner rather than a strict teacher. So I wanted to add these advantages of Bangla School, to what Rajiv was saying as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was actually going to ask you the same question that you just answered. So my last question is actually to Doly Begum. What is your opinion of Bangla school, and how do you think it impacts kids learning Bangla or language awareness like that?
Absolutely, yeah. I think Dr. Shams and Rajiv both talked about different aspects of Bangla school. I also got a chance to go through the app, and actually Rajiv came to our office and we went through some of the games, and we were talking about how easily it can become accessible. And I think that was one of the first priority that, as a parent, Rajiv was thinking about is the motivation behind it, but also how do I make sure that my kids, for my kids, it's not too difficult. Because the other thing is we are expecting kids to learn another language on top of all the things that they are doing here. And that is sort of the unfortunate reality that we're faced with in any country that's not your motherland, or where your mother tongue is spoken. It's because they go to school, they have their Monday to Friday, they probably have on top of that, they probably have extracurricular activities, all of those things put together. And then when they come home for the weekend or have their homework, here we are asking them to learn another language. And that's what they feel like. Well, why are you doing this to me? Why are you making me have another subject? You just added on more work for me. How does this help me? This doesn't do anything for my grade. Like all of those things. So that value is not very apparent at that moment. And that's why it's a very difficult task for parents. I know my parents tried to teach me Bangla as I was growing up here. And if I didn't read Bangla newspaper, I would not have kind of kept that knowledge. And I know that when I talk to a lot of the kids, they'll say, well, I used to know how to read, but I kind of forgot now because it's been a long time. And so for all of those kids, whether it's a fresh language, whether it's they're trying to just keep up with it, all of that, it's still something that you're asking on top of all the things they have to do. And so for parents, it becomes a really difficult task. And I think what Dr. Shams said, she got sucked into it because it was more fun, and it was something that was kind of there's a play element to it while you're learning something. And this is something that I think in our when I think about Bangladeshi classes, the classes that I did in Bangladesh as a kid, that was not really part of the pedagogy. That's not what we think about when we think about the way of learning. It's more about here's what you need to memorize, here are the letters, here's what you need to do. This app, what I was really impressed with was that it looks at how do you make it more fun and how do you feel that sense of ownership after you created something. So that example he gave about learning how to write Baba was so important, because now that kid has done something where he feels, well, you know what, I can actually write something instead of going through all the letters, all the 56 letters, and actually making a point of, well, I have gone through these stages and I have to pass a certain level to get to a higher level of learning. But rather, I have to go through these stages to unlock another, room in the app so that I could find a better game or better, better stage of the game, which is a completely different way of looking, but it allows us to do the same thing, which is learn our language, right? And I think that was what I found really impressive and really beautiful. And I'll repeat the example that I said, which was the idea of having kids kind of connect with parents, and when they learn maybe 10 letters, they're able to write their own story, which was really, really cool to me. And I think that's what kids are going to really like about the app as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This actually brings us to the end of this amazing discussion. I want to thank you all again for, I think you have helped us understand this problem a bit more elaborately, as well as, the reasons behind it. So, and thanks to all the audience who have joined us on this live today. I'm actually certain that our astounding speakers have helped you understand the problem and answered a lot of your questions already. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for coming.